The other thing, at least with the big 3, they are super leveraged companies, right? They have like massive supply chains, global supply chains, very complex. But also remember, only 10 years ago, they got bailed out as well. So they have a history of mismanaging.
Okay, so as we think about different industries that are impacted by this pandemic, the auto industry comes to mind as one that's been really heavily impacted, right? Obviously, demand has completely dried up. Where are you going to go, right? You're physical distancing, you're staying at home, and also the factories are being shut down, right? And we see, folks like Elon Musk trying to get that reversed. What do you think is going to happen to this industry? It seems really hard hit, and it seems to be one that's going to struggle to get back on its feet.
Yeah, that's a very good question, right? And auto industry historically has been like symbolizes American manufacturing, right? Like that auto industry one that brought in assembly line, all those huge investments in technology and things like that. So even before COVID hit, there were certain trends that were happening with the industry as a whole, right? One was they weren't selling much sedans. At least the big 3 weren't selling much sedans. They were closing out factories. SUVs were selling good and trucks were selling good, but sedan, there was a huge dip in sedans. Ridership and ownership was also going down, right? So that was pre-COVID, and COVID happens, like you said, factories are shut down, supply chains at a standstill, right? The other thing, at least with the big 3, they are super leveraged companies, right? They have like massive supply chains, global supply chains, very complex, with a huge OEM presence, sometimes close to the factory, sometimes across continents. There are sub-assemblies moving across continents to have a car manufactured. So they are very leveraged, complex supply chains. But also remember, only 10 years ago, they got bailed out as well. So they have a history of mismanaging stuff. And also, the other thing, the way these guys work is they look at the demand, forecast the demand, build up the capacity, and make inventory in anticipation of hitting that demand, right? So they have a bunch of pent up or inventory sitting there with taking up huge carrying costs. Now, COVID hits. Their top line is completely gone, right? People are not buying cars anymore. People are getting laid off, things like that. Their revenue is almost gone, and then expenses are going up. They're in a lot of trouble. Mm-hmm. But if you look at the industry as well, there's another rising trend or a rising player that I think is going to seriously change the game. They're already changing the game, but I think post-COVID, they're going to have a bigger impact, and that is Tesla. One of the biggest reasons why I think Tesla is going to be a big player is there's a huge brand affiliation with their customer segment. Their customer segment typically is upper middle class or upper class folks, right, who have more disposable income, who are not necessarily much impacted because of this pandemic. They have either their business that's doing fine, or they have work from home options. They have steady jobs, steady income streams, right? Yeah. And then there's also a big brand affiliation, like we said, with that particular segment. Right, so those are two things, and the other big thing is Tesla. They have a huge demand cushion. So what I mean by that is they have so much demand, they don't have enough capacity to fulfill that demand. Mm-hmm. Right, they're always running over capacity. They're always trying to play catch up. That is huge in this case. So even if that demand goes away, they're still okay. They're still hitting their bare minimums and they are being profitable, right? That is a luxury that the other car makers don't have right now. And I think that's pretty huge. Now, there's Cybertruck, which is going to be launched in production probably 2021, 2022. But right now they have like 500,000 pre-orders. That is again pretty huge, right? Even if half the demand goes out, they still have 250,000 cars in pre-orders that they need to fulfill for 2022. Yeah, those are some of the things that are going in favor for Tesla. Now, from a manufacturing standpoint itself, from a supply chain standpoint itself, the way Tesla cars are made, they are made in one single massive roof, the gigafactories, right? They are made end to end, and they manufacture most of their parts. So that kind of, again, cushions the impact, cushions the disruption in production because of global supply chain issues, right? Whereas in the case of traditional automakers, there are hundreds of parts, or thousands of parts coming from different parts of the world, and then they get assembled somewhere, shipped somewhere, and then launched somewhere, right? So it's a much simpler process, and mainly it might be because of scale and other things. Regardless, their process is small. Right. And when you look at the car itself, again, from a manufacturing point, the car has, or from an engineering point, has a much smaller footprint than a traditional car. For example, a Model S has around like 5,000, 6,000 parts compared to a Honda Civic, which has over 20,000 parts. And the manufacturing process, the way it works is like they take a roll of aluminum or steel, depending on the kind of car they're making, and they make the entire car. And there's very little stamping process, very little painting process. And Cybertruck, there's no painting at all. It's just full steel, right? So they have kind of eliminated a lot of bottlenecks in their manufacturing process. And that is primarily because they don't have all these extra parts. It's a simpler model, right? And from a cost perspective, the most expensive piece on the car is the battery, right? I think for the battery itself, they are spending around like $10,000 to $15,000 on our Model S. So that's the biggest expense, and that's where Tesla's investing heavily on the battery technology, right, to bring down their costs. So both from a manufacturing and from an engineering perspective, they're better off than the other car manufacturers. So from a demand, manufacturing, supply chain perspective, they have an edge with the other guys, and I think this particular pandemic is going to be a catalyst for to take them to the next level, basically.
Right. So they're not facing the same challenges. They're able to kind of weather through the storm because they've built a different type of manufacturing capacity and supply chain that is better able to weather that storm. Now, I mean, a couple of questions here, right? Like, one is issue of batteries, right? We're thinking about China is still predominantly the biggest supplier of lithium-ion batteries, and so we run into those same supply chain questions in terms of do we think that Tesla will continue to have access to those batteries in the long term, especially as Chinese manufacturers are also ramping up their EV production?
Well, that's why they've made investments and acquisitions in the battery space, right? Tesla has been mostly buying from CATL, Panasonic for their car batteries, and then for their superchargers from LG and Samsung, right? So now their acquisitions and investments into battery technology and energy in general is going to help them bring down their cost of batteries, right?
Yeah, for sure. So there's another question about, like I said earlier, Elon Musk has been a character, and he's been a very interesting personality, right? He's rallying against the physical distancing or stay-at-home measures. Yeah. He's rallying against those factory closures. I think the difference between Elon Musk and some other eccentric CEOs is that while Elon Musk is he is controversial, he does say things that doesn't really fit with the narrative, or he says things that are going against the FCC, SEC. What we see from Elon Musk is that he doesn't actually do anything totally out of whack. Like, what I'm thinking here are people like Adam Neumann, right, former CEO of WeWork, who basically was enriching himself with the WeWork enterprise by buying up the properties and then renting it to WeWork, right? Or someone like Chip Wilson, who has talks about people's bodies and has an ideal type for his customers. And so what we don't see from Elon Musk are those types of destructive behaviors, right?
I mean, there's no denying the eccentric and erratic behavior of Elon Musk, right? But there's also no denying that that guy's a genius. Some of the things that he have done with Tesla and even SpaceX is just mind blowing, right? For these reasons, from a CEO perspective, the way they have positioned their company, their competitive advantages, I think Tesla is going to be there for the long run. Traditional auto industries better start innovating or figuring out things if they want to stay competitive in this market.